so much for staying with us. We started our conversations this morning talking about the focus on making states viable. Then we segued into food production, we talked about the minimum wage. All of it comes back to one place, the family. Because whether the states are going to be viable or not, it's either a father or a mother that is working. And we just heard in one of our conversations previously that women have, there is a significant population of farmers in Nigeria. And when we talk about the minimum wage or maximum wage, cost of everything, school fees, rent, feeding the family, caring for the family, wearing whatever it is you need to wear, and helping people. Everything comes to the family as the funnel. Input and output, all family. But guess what? While the father and mother are busy taking on these issues, they have a primary assignment of being parents. And we know generally it will seem like the rules of parenting have changed. And if you are anything 35, 40 years and above, the way you were parented, we have been told a few times on this program, you can no longer parent your own children that way. Back then, your mom gave you an instruction, you asked why, you had a headache all night, and you woke up with a swollen head. But today, you say, go do this. Your child asks you, Mommy, why? Daddy, why? Oh my God. Anyway, let's get into the new rules of parenting this morning with Praise for Web. He's here with us in the studio. He's a family engineering specialist. He's also president of Praise for Web International. Thanks for joining us today.
It's my pleasure being here. Good to see you.
First of all, how did you grow up? Asking why?
No, I couldn't. I couldn't have asked why, because my dad was a lion of the tribe of the home. He controlled us with the blaring of the horn of his car. You dare not. Couldn't even talk back.
When you hear the horn, what happens?
You had to, whatever you were doing, you have to stop it and pretend as if you were reading or something, because my father only knew one way. You've got to study. Yes. But
if your father were growing up in this generation?
I'm not, I'm actually, with a bit of hindsight, maybe I'm glad that my father had passed, because I'm not sure he would be able to relate at all, with what happens right now, where your children can question you, you would have to explain, you would have to negotiate. It wasn't my father's style. My father was very, I say to people, that I don't steal, and I don't steal. When I get into church and people say, it was when they go to church, they stopped stealing, Jesus took control of their life. That wasn't my story. I couldn't steal because my father conditioned me not to steal. So he puts a coin on his table, he uses a pencil to circle the coin, and then he sends you to his room to bring something. If your hand mistakenly moves the coin out of the cycle, he calls it attempted stealing, and
wow.
Yes, and he will flog the leading the light out of you, after which he asks you to pull out your pocket, and he will tell you that if you steal the money that is not yours, it tears your pocket, and when you make your money, it never stays. So wow. That was the conditioning. So even as an adult, when I do projects for governments, if they had leftover, I retired it to the state government, because that was the conditioning I was given. Yeah.
So it starts with conditioning, is that what you're saying?
Well, that's what it used to be, which is what has now become what we call scripting. But now, instead of the corporal punishment way, it's now subliminal scripting is what it is. And so you need to change a little bit, because a lot of things have changed, the dynamics have changed. You now literally have to create your own village, because of course the villages we had then were much more viable than what we have right now. And so that's why we talk about the new rules of parenting right now. It doesn't mean that some things have changed or will change. It's just that the application of them, the principles remain the same. Is how you apply them.
Okay, let's begin with, when we talk about parenting, we're talking about children.
Yes.
Well, let's begin with the parents. So this parent is a mother. However, first of all, she's a working woman.
Yeah.
She works she leaves home very early, comes home late, and even when she gets home, she's still working. She's cooking. She's a wife. She's a sibling. And she's responsible to so many people. She has uplines that she has to report to, breathing down her neck. She has downlines that are making or could be making life difficult for her. She works in the private sector and in the public sector, and she has expectations. She has hopes. She has dreams for herself.
Yes.
She has a purpose in mind.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, she's a parent. First of all, let's talk about that parent. Let's begin from there.
So,
this parent was in the same traffic you almost got caught in this morning. All night yesterday. So let's start with that parent.
It starts with wholesomeness, and that's what we talk about, and that's why the modern parenting is totally different from what it used to be. That if you don't know how to self-nurture, which is self-awareness, understanding of yourself and your dynamics and what you're dealing with, you will not understand that there is the you, which is your identity, but then there are different roles that you play. Each of those roles have got role description. And so if you don't know how to switch from one role to the other, for example, the woman you described, unknown to her, had switched to a feminine mode, a masculine mode. Because at work, you work like a man, especially if you're a C-suite executive or if you're a leader, you have to give instruction, you back out instruction and all those things. Now, unknown to her, she's been subliminally reconditioned to a state where when she gets back home, if she doesn't understand that, hey, I'm out of work, I'm back home, she's going to forget to switch back to the feminine mode. So she can come home and begin to back instruction as her husband, still looking at him like a staff and he's going to fire. And then the man is looking at her to say, hey, I'm the king here, and things like that. So what we say is self-awareness and wholesomeness is key. Unfortunately, many people don't have a wholesomeness routine, that they follow. Because Nigeria is stressful already. And then you are in a stress-driven societies. The workplace is stressful. You have all kinds of people making your life miserable and things like that. So, for example, if you're at work, and then maybe you didn't meet up with your target, and your boss is that bully, comes at you and says, nasty things, you can transfer the aggression to your children when you get home. But then, as he's saying those things, part of the wholesomeness routine is to leave that meeting and stay for like 5 minutes by yourself and say to yourself, he wasn't talking about you, he was talking about what you did. So you separate yourself from what you've done. And so unconsciously, you have to address your mind so that your mind does not interpret what he has said. So he said that your work was bad. You won't interpret that to mean that you are bad. Because if you interpret that to mean you are bad, then you begin to have some esteem issues, and then you transfer aggression on the people, So there are so many things I usually recommend. For example, when you get back from work, don't head to the kitchen. First place you want to get to is your room. And when you drop your bags and everything, you need to wrap your hands around your body and say to yourself, baby girl, welcome back home. You've done a good job at work. Welcome to wife mode or mother mode. And that single activity that takes less than 2 minutes to do, is so profound. It says a lot of people, because if you don't switch back, you will still continue to back instructions, and then you're not ready to be in a conversation mode. And for many of the things you've talked about right now, what we're saying in the new rules of parenting is that, it can no longer be the woman who will do all those things. The men must now understand that taking care of the woman is not helping your wife, is actually keeping the family clean and helping your children. So if your wife is at work, stuck in traffic, and then you are still at home waiting for her to come and cook, there's something wrong in there. Worst case scenario, maybe you can hire a chef or something. If you can hire a chef, then you got to get into the kitchen or at least microwave and maybe make a bath or something like that. Because if we don't consider the reality of the modern day woman and we still look at them through the prism of the olden days woman, we will not understand that the olden day woman was not in the boardroom. This woman is in the boardroom. And so when she comes back home, it's got to be a team-based system where we know that, yes, your wife is the goalkeeper, you are the striker, but the goalkeeper has been dribbled, the ball is heading towards your net. You don't stand aside and say, let them score my wife, God catch them. No, you know that No player loses a match. It's the team that will lose the match. So you allow them to score a goal against your team. It's your team that loses at the end of the day. It's not your wife.
You know, it's like right now everyone believes that you are speaking for the woman, even though you are a man. Now switch to masculine mode now, because the role is perhaps worse for the man.
Yes.
All those things that I described, they're perhaps even worse for the man.
Yes.
Plus, there are, of course, generally we hear that men don't talk.
Yes.
We hear that men suck it up a lot.
Yeah.
They carry a lot of emotional burdens. Yeah. They suffer depression that they don't let the children know. They have mental health issues that they don't address, and they continue to take on the responsibility of the man. House rent, school fees, and all those responsibilities weigh on the man. In addition to those other things that the woman also has to go through. It's not to say that some women don't play those roles as well. Yeah. It's just that societally, it's a responsibility for the man. Let's talk about that man himself and how he can also balance all these. Yeah. Being a good father.
It's the same process. Unfortunately, the socialization of the man or the boy child in Africa and in some parts of the world, it's very faulty. So when you have a situation where you say boys don't cry, and so you have a guy, every time I had to handle domestic violence issues in Lagos or in any part of the world, I see a boy who is upset with the man he has become, who was not allowed to externalize emotions and things like that. And so this is what we're saying now, to say that as a family, you must now have a family governance system. In your family governance system is where the two of you come together and articulate your family vision. You articulate your family values. You create the DNA code of your family. Then you create the routines and rituals of your family. Now, most of the stressors, the human mind is so elastic. There is nothing we can handle, right? And that's why if they say COVID happened, you realize that we adjusted. If they say, so the same people believe that, they were stuck with their family during COVID. Now they're the same people out there. So the human mind can adjust to anything. And so what we now need to begin to do is to say, what are the things stressing us? So you have a situation where the man is the sole provider. If the man is the sole provider, you're going to kill him. It's only a matter of time, right? What is the woman doing? And so some narratives like, his money is our money, my money is my money, has got to stop.
Even the men say that. So her money is her money, my money is her money. It's
socialization, because if you have a man whose esteem is not intact, who is not secure, a lot of those men, if you check them out, they believe that economic power is the only means of controlling a woman. That if you hold economic power, and that's why during wedding ceremony, one of the most disgusting prayers I think they pray is to tell the man, whatever you are going to be used, God is going to use to make you a proper husband to your wife, you will not lack it. And the question I ask is, if I'm getting married to Bill Gates' daughter and the father's willed his entire wealth to her, what level of work must I do to out-earn her? Right? Because we keep narrowing these things down to economics. See, no matter how much you have as a man, if you can't provide leadership for a woman, she will still not follow you. Because even if you don't have money, enough money, you must have money, if you can provide leadership, because a time comes she wants to look up to you, she wants you to take decisions, if you can do that, a lot of women will follow you. And so we are not teaching men to be that leader who can cast a vision for the family, who can handle things, who can properly communicate, because we suck it in. We tell other people we don't have the capacity to listen to our wives, and so you realize that we have not learned how to process emotions as men. Because we just move on, we just believe that, okay, I'll be fine. So we don't talk about issues. And when you don't talk about issues, you kill yourself from within, and you transit from a human being, because you're no longer in a state of being, you now become maybe a human thing who is now being used for all sorts of purposes, for school fees, for as ATM machine, or as whatever. And so wholesomeness on both parts is where you start from, where we can say, okay, how do we exercise? How do we meditate? What are the activities we can do that distresses us from the toxicity of what we find in our environment?
It's okay, but that's a long way, right?
It's a long way, but again, there are templates available, that little things that people can do, for example, that can ease the stress in various families.
Easy for you to say. I can imagine someone say, easy for you to say. But right now, thankfully, COVID taught us something. You can't always escape your problems.
Yes.
There are those who thought that, okay, well, this child is just being unnecessarily unrealistic and problematic. COVID taught us that, look, you can't always escape. Okay, well, let me just sleep. Once I wake up, I leave them to their problems at home and I go to the office. We know what happened after COVID. We understand that there were quite a number of divorces.
A lot of them.
Simply because they were escaping it before,
yes,
but now they couldn't escape it when COVID came. Same thing with the parenting. We couldn't escape it when COVID came. So why don't we just bite the bullet once and for all, look ourselves in the mirror and recognize that these things are not going to go away. We're only postponing the evil day. Now, parenting. Now, what are the latest challenges in the world, particularly in Nigeria, that people need to be aware of? I hear all kinds of things that young children, that children do of whatever age. And I'm wondering, how in the universe do these parents themselves cope with all the pressures in the world?
You know that a lot of times, one of the things, because I live in the US and I work a lot with African parents because their children get into trouble all the time. And one of the things I have seen over the years, even with those of us in Nigeria, is that in a bid to become the modern parent, we've gone to another extreme. And so people do not know that what gives your child his identity is a sense of belonging and family history and a sense of your family identity. So every family has got a superpower that many people are not aware of. So whenever I'm talking to parents and I ask them, can your child tell me about the story of their grandfather or their great-grandfather? Nobody in the room. And so your child does not have a sense of heritage. If you have ever worked with Black Americans, you will realize that one of the things that has caused a lot of imbalance in their identity is the fact that they can't trace where home is and they don't understand their history. And probably the names they were given was given by the people, slave masters in the plantation. And so when your child does not have a sense of it, and I'll tell you how that literally panned out for me. I was in a meeting one day in the US, and it was a meeting filled with all whites, and and it was time to introduce myself. And some guy, he was making a racial slur, and he said, "Oh, black man," I was the only black man in the room. "Introduce yourself." And I wasn't offended at all. I stood up, and my introduction was, well, I am a descendant of the ancestry that created the first smart city in the world. And it's a place called Benin Kingdom between 1300 and 1700. So you can look it up on Google. And the room went silent. And I could see people on their phones, and they actually saw Benin Kingdom. Now, during tea break, a lot of people came to meet me to say, well, can you tell us more about the Benin Kingdom? So I said to people, if I didn't have a sense of history, I would have felt very bad. But it was an opportunity for me to lecture them of what heritage I had, of what home and what family was like. Now, when your children don't have that, because a whole lot of us don't even know the story. We don't know the story of the greatness of our father. When you meet the Jewish children, they talk to you about the father, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. If you meet the Indians, they're talking about Mahatma Gandhi. They're talking about, if you meet the Greeks, they are talking about Zeus and all this. But our children don't have that. And this is the missing link that we are not paying attention. Even when they talk to them about the black family, black month in America, they're telling them about blacks that they don't. They're not going to tell them about Nnamdi Azikiwe or Obafemi Awolowo or Ahmadiyya or something like that, because we have literally lost a sense of history. Now, if you have lost a sense of history, your identity is already compromised. Now add that to parents who themselves were subjected to dysfunctionality in their upbringing by the people in their lives who didn't understand the superpower they have. And so you have a situation where people needed parenting and now parenting other children. And so everything they see online on how to raise children becomes the thing to do. So they'll say, okay, you know what, you don't talk to your child, you allow children to do all, and that's why you have a situation. There is a drug pandemic in Nigeria right now, drug use. You are seeing a lot of children right now, they're reporting in our offices who are suicidal, who are dealing with depression. And so you look at something like as serious as depression. Why are young people dealing with depression? Why didn't we deal with depression? Because resilience was built into our way of life growing up. You walked to school by yourself. There were no mobile phones, and your parents trusted you to come back home, right? But now, even with mobile phones, an average parent is afraid. They may kidnap myself. So they live in an enclosed place. They can't live within the society. And because everyone now has a voice, everyone now has their truth, you can't even correct other people's children. And once your child does not have a sense of identity, a sense of history, and a sense of village, it becomes a free-for-all. Social media becomes the next parent. And so they will feed their values from social media, and it becomes a free-for-all, and that's where we're at.
So essentially you're saying, if we're going to parent, the parents need to first of all value their own parenting.
Absolutely. They need to, that's what we call parenting charter. Parenting charter is the two of you auditing the way you were raised and asking yourself, which of us had the better parenting experience? If it was your wife, then let her design the system that produced her, because there are things that parenting will teach you normally. Like I mentioned the issue of stealing. I don't steal. I don't go late for meetings, because my father will tell you it's arrogance for the people to be waiting for you. He said humility is when you are waiting for them. So even in my organization, we have a policy of 30 minutes arrival before time. We will do everything to ensure that we don't go late, whichever way. And so you realize that when there is no parenting charter, that you can now build into system. Let me tell you, the difference between the old parenting model and new parenting model is now systems. Because you now live in a world that is systems driven and no longer emotion. The older model was emotional, so your father beat you for what you didn't even understand. And when they eventually found out that they were wrong, they never said sorry to you. They would now say, okay, maybe there was something you did and God wanted to punish you.
But that's which you just said now, leads to the fact that there are people who are still holding on to those things against their parents, dead or alive.
Absolutely.
And carrying that into their own parenting.
Yes. Yeah, in fact, trauma, an average parent in Africa is a walking trauma. And that's why the first thing we do with people is to take them through a self-healing process. Some of them are living in unforgiveness. Some of them, I always tell people, how you know that nothing has changed in your parenting? If your children are already accusing you of what you used to accuse your parents of, it's just suddenly, what it means is that it's the same software that powered your parents that's powering you. And so you have a situation where a child spills water at the age of 4, and the parents beats the child. The question is, spilling of water at age 4, is it a bad behavior or an expected behavior for a 4-year-old? It's expected behavior, but you were beaten for being a child. You made mistakes, you were beaten. And so now you are beating your child who is going to beat his own child, because that's what we call generational pattern. So what parents need to do is to first of all come to terms with the fact that, you know what, I was traumatized. I did that. I was always shouting. But then I realized that my shouting was trauma. Because my father, if he wanted to correct you, if you have watched your Obama movie, the way they call, what they call a paper, they call you as if you wanted to die. Press yo! That was the way, you were called. You were already traumatized, so I even had praise you.
In fact, the moment you hear your name, you have fear.
Yeah.
What have I done?
To talk to my dad, I had to do sign of the cross. I had to commit his heart into God's hand. In fact, the time I freely talked to my dad was when he was 60, and he passed on at 62 or thereabout, right? And so I didn't have that father-to-son interaction of hugging me, of doing all those things that parents. So when my mom came to my house one day, in the early days when my son was young, and my son was playing drums on my head, my mom felt a bit uncomfortable. And I knew what was happening, because her mind quickly went to her husband, who was my dad, to say, oh, wow. And so she told myself, she said, King, you are very lucky. Because fathers were lying on the tribe of Judah. You couldn't hug them. You couldn't get close to them. So there were so many things in our life that we had to learn by ourselves. Who taught us about sex? Many of us in my generation learned sexuality through a magazine called Lolly or Dowda the Sexy Guy. That was how we learned it, right? And that was a bad, sex educator, right? So if you didn't teach your child about sex, if you didn't teach your child about emotional awareness, what happened? And it's not because you are bad. It's simply because you were not taught and you need help. And that's why we say to everyone that the first thing you have to admit is that, I have trauma in my life and I need help. So we take them through healing the inner child exercise, where the child in you that was not allowed to grow is allowed to freely express the pain you feel. And so you see a lot of grown-up men crying in sessions because that trauma, they bottled it over the years. And once you go through that process, you realize that there's alignment between the child in you and the adult you become, and then you can now learn skills that requires. For example, you are shouting on your child, screaming all the time. I have created a simple process that has helped a lot of parents. It's called perceptual code. You are shouting on that child because of how you see that child, right? If you say every child in my family is a royalty, the question is, how do you raise royalties? How do you correct royalties? How do you communicate with royalties? You don't shout on royalties, you know. But if you say, it's my child, because many of us don't actually respect the child. We respect people above us, but we don't respect the child because there's something in you that says, I gave birth to you. I saw you when you were born. I'm paying school fees, so why should I respect you? But every human being deserves some respect.
Okay, I think the takeaway, one major takeaway from you today is that mother and father should sit together.
Yes.
Audit their growing up.
Yes.
So that the one who was raised like an area boy should humble himself.
Absolutely.
Or herself to the one that was raised like a human being.
Yes.
Okay, let me drink the water on top of that one until the next time you and I have this conversation. Praiseful family engineering specialist and president, Praiseful International. Thank you so much for your time today. Truly appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, now you know. Call mommy or call your wife or call your husband. Have this conversation. We'll be right back. Alibaba is here.